The cab slowed in front of the house before I even had a chance to breathe. I hadn't said the address aloud. The driver read it from the paperwork folded in my lap, still warm from the discharge clerk's printer. 25 years in uniform, and all it took was a street name to make my chest tighten. The house looked the same, white siding, narrow porch stone walkway cracked where the old dog used to dig. But something in the air had shifted. The hydrangeas were gone. So was the flag. The porch light glowed a faint amber soft as memory, but it didn't feel like welcome. It felt like surveillance. I stepped out and stood still for a moment, my boots brushing gravel. No one opened the door. I pressed the intercom. The delay was long enough to make my pulse quicken. Then a voice. Flat, familiar. Taryn Calla. "I just got back," I said. "I thought maybe I'm calling the police." She didn't shout it, didn't stammer. Just a statement like she was ordering takeout. I blinked, unsure I heard her right. "Calla, it's me. You don't live here. You left. You disappeared." "I served," I said, my throat tightening. "I just came home." Her face appeared in the upstairs window eyes hard behind the glass. "This isn't your home anymore." She didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't ask if I had somewhere to go. I watched her press the phone to her ear. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I stood still as the cruiser turned the corner, its headlights sweeping across the front lawn like searchlights. When the officers stepped out, one of them paused, taking in the ribbons on my coat. Recognition flickered, but procedure overrode it. "This property belongs to Calla Greer and Richard Ellison," the younger one said. "You're not on record." The gate clicked shut behind them. I didn't fight it. I just walked back to the car, sat in the back seat, and stared at the porch where I used to fall asleep in summer. The light was still on, but no one opened the door. The cruiser idled for a minute after they spoke, like they were giving me a chance to say something else. I didn't. There wasn't a script for this. One officer looked down at his notepad. The other kept his eyes on me too long to be neutral, not long enough to be sympathy. "Ma'am," the younger one said softer now. "Do you have somewhere else to go tonight?" I nodded. I didn't. The older one gave a brief nod, then turned back to the house. Calla stood in the doorway now, arms folded like she was freezing, though the night wasn't cold. Her face didn't change when the gate clanged shut. She watched like a security camera, recording not feeling. I didn't move until their taillights disappeared. Then I stepped back up to the edge of the fence. "I just wanted to see Mom," I said. Calla didn't answer. "She knows I'm back right. She doesn't want to see you." "Did she say that?" "She doesn't have to." There was a silence between us that used to hold shared memories, kitchen burns, sleepover secrets, the time we buried that broken necklace and promised never to fight over it. That silence was gone now, replaced by something sharp and deliberate. "Dad signed the deed last year," she added like she was checking off a box. "It's in both our names now. That house was left to me." "No. You were just told that. Grandpa never filed anything official." "I've looked." Her voice was so matter-of-fact it sounded rehearsed. "You're not in the will, Taryn. You're not on the deed. You're not part of this." She turned before I could speak. The door closed without sound. I walked back to my car and sat in the dark coat still zipped to my chin. From the driveway, a figure moved behind the blinds, tall, upright. Dad. He didn't look out. Not once. And that was when I knew I wasn't just shut out. I was being erased. The next morning, I walked into Grayson's Diner just off the old highway strip, where every booth had a cracked vinyl cushion, and the waitress knew everyone's name by the second visit. Ruth was already there, tucked in the back like she hadn't moved since undergrad. Same black blazer, same focused stare, but now it held more weight, like life had sharpened her instead of weathering her. She didn't ask how I'd been, didn't offer condolences or small talk, just tilted her tablet toward me and tapped the screen. "You need to see this." The listing was familiar, my grandfather's address, but the name on the owner line wasn't mine. It wasn't even Calla's. It was a company I'd never heard of, Ironfield Holdings, LLC. I stared at it, waiting for it to make sense. "I didn't sell anything," I said quietly. Ruth tapped again. Another document appeared, a property transfer filed 3 months ago. My name was there, not just listed. Signed. "See it," she said. Seller Taryn Ellison. My throat dried instantly. That's not my signature. I know. That's why I called you. I ran a notary scan. This one's been flagged in 2 counties for irregular filings. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Ruth leaned forward. They moved fast, and they moved like they knew what they were doing. The company's a shell. Ironfield Holdings doesn't even have a physical address listed in the state registry. I looked down at the document again. The curve of the Y in my name, the slant in the E. It was close enough to pass at a glance. But it wasn't mine. They forged it, I said. Ruth nodded once. And if they forged this, what else did they fake? She slid a folder across the table. That's what we're going to find out. I parked 2 blocks down, same as before. Not because I had to, but because I wasn't ready to get any closer. The house looked colder this time. The porch light was off. The old hydrangea bushes Grandma used to baby with coffee grounds and crushed eggshells were gone, dug out down to the roots. A plastic sign leaned crooked in the lawn, private listing, no agent contact. It didn't look like my home anymore. Just a property now, a number in someone's ledger. I stayed in the car watching the windows. Every corner used to hold something. A telescope Grandpa bought secondhand, the swing he built from leftover deckwood, the tin box where we practiced Morse code. I could still hear the taps, 2 short, 1 long, his voice from the porch saying, "You'll need to know how to speak even when they won't let you." Now, even the porch railing had been replaced. I wondered if the new boards knew what they'd erased. A flicker of movement crossed the 2nd floor. Curtain shift. Shadow. Someone was home, but no one looked out. Maybe they knew I was there. Maybe they didn't care. I pulled out the folded folder Ruth gave me. Inside, copies of the fake deed flagged notary stamp and screenshots of Ironfield's non-existent registration. I read them like battle plans, clean lines, cold logic. But between the ink was something messier. They hadn't just taken the house. They were rewriting the story, cutting me out like I never lived there. Never raked those leaves, never cried under those glow-in-the-dark stars. I zipped my coat and turned the key in the ignition. The war wasn't just legal. It was personal now, and I wasn't letting them win without a fight. The note was wedged beneath my wiper blade the next morning. Plain white paper typed in all caps. "If you're really Taryn, meet me at Alley 9. 9:30 p.m. Come alone." No signature. No explanation. I stared at it for a long time, half expecting someone to be watching. But the street was still. No movement behind the curtains. No shadows on the sidewalk. That night, I left everything traceable at home: phone badge, even my coat with the rank pins. I wore black, pulled my hood low, and walked the blocks like I used to when Grandpa taught me how to move quietly. The alley sat between 2 abandoned storefronts, narrow and reeking of rust and engine oil. Chain-link fences lined either side. I waited 10 minutes before a man stepped out from behind a dumpster. Mid-50s, calloused hands, grease under his nails like it was part of him. "I knew your grandfather," he said. I didn't answer. He nodded toward the street. "Ethan. I work at Maddox Auto. Been here long enough to notice when things don't sit right." What kind of things? He scratched his jaw. "Black vans, no plates, show up late, always back into the alley. They unload crates, no labels, real quiet. Same guy every time. Your sister's husband." "Mason." "Yeah, acts like he owns the whole block, wears gloves, doesn't talk." I felt my stomach knot. What's in the crates can't say. But they ain't furniture. They don't treat 'em like boxes. They treat 'em like risk. He stepped closer. "People around here talk. They say you're unstable. Say combat messed you up. They've said worse." He looked me in the eye. I don't believe him. I didn't look away. I didn't thank him either. I just asked where the vans went. I came back just after midnight. Black hoodie camera clipped beneath the collar and boots, soft enough to blend with the gravel. The alley behind the house hadn't changed, still narrow, still damp, still holding secrets in the way oil clung to the cracks. I crouched behind the half-collapsed fence where Ethan told me to wait. Just before 1, the first engine rumbled low. 2 black trucks coasted in without headlights. No markings, no plates. They backed in smooth and practiced. Mason climbed out of the second truck. His movements were brisk, confident, like this was routine. He didn't look around, just pointed to the back entrance and barked something too quiet to hear. 4 other men moved fast, box after box, all the same size. No labels, no sound when they hit the ground. I filmed everything, timestamps, faces, gestures. Then I moved. Around the side of the fence toward the vent near the basement. The metal slats were rusted but open enough. I slipped the mic and pressed record. Voices filtered through. Muffled at first, then one cut through low and certain. If the officer finds out we sever the tie. Immediate, no backtracking. I froze. That voice didn't belong to Mason. It was gravel-lined, deliberate, familiar. My father. I closed my eyes for a moment, just long enough to feel the heat in my throat, the pressure in my jaw. I didn't cry, didn't shake. I kept recording. He wasn't covering for them. He was directing it. By the time I pulled the mic back and slipped away, the trucks were gone. The alley was quiet again, but the silence wasn't clean anymore. It was stained with something I couldn't scrub out, something I couldn't unknow. I didn't sleep. By sunrise, my apartment had become a war room. Ruth sat on my couch, hair pulled back, glasses low on her nose as she flipped through property records and court filings. Across from her, Dev Patel's voice crackled through the secure call audio-only voice modulated just like old times. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, but the moment I forwarded the files, he replied within minutes. "I'm in," he said. "You still store backups like you used to?" "Better," I said. 3 encrypted drives air-gapped. "Good," he replied. "Start uploading." While Ruth organized hard copies and court-ready folders, Dev dove headfirst into the metadata timestamps document authorship chains, buried IP logs. He found the notary's digital seal flagged 2 years ago for forged DMV affidavits. Same signature sat on my deed transfer. Ruth was building a timeline and Dev was tearing apart their trail. It didn't take long before the pieces started snapping together. Ironfield Holdings wasn't just a shell. It was a funnel. Dev traced midnight transfers from Mason's logistics firm into Ironfield's offshore accounts. Short bursts, large sums, always around the same dates as the unmarked deliveries. "This isn't just fraud," Ruth said, flipping through the latest batch of filings. "This is coordinated. This is deliberate." Dev's voice came through quieter now. "Got something else. Lease agreement. Industrial warehouse in Roanoke authorized 3 months ago." I opened the file. My name was listed. Authorized by Richard Ellison. He hadn't just orchestrated the deal. He'd done it using my clearance, my identity, and a forged signature good enough to fool anyone who wasn't looking. But we were looking now. Ruth stood and handed me the binder. "We're ready." And I knew exactly where we were going next. The morning air was sharp and still. I wore my uniform not for pride, not for performance, but because I wanted them to see exactly who they had tried to erase. Ruth parked at the curb while I stepped out first. The house hadn't changed, but something in me had. No more side streets, no more watching from a distance. We walked up the drive together, steady and silent. I rang the doorbell. Calla answered. For a moment, her expression didn't register anything. Then she saw the jacket, the ribbons, the binder in Ruth's hand. Her face drained like someone had flipped a switch. Ruth didn't waste time. "We're here to serve you with a court injunction," she said evenly. "Effective immediately. All property transfers, lease agreements, and financial activities tied to this address are frozen under federal order." Calla didn't move. Her hand hovered like she might slam the door. Behind her, Mason appeared. He leaned in the doorway, too calm, too rehearsed. "You really want to play this out, Taryn?" I met his eyes. "We're not playing anything." His smile curled. "You don't know who you're up against." "I do," I said. "A logistics fraudster who signed contracts with stolen credentials. A man hiding behind shell companies and forged deeds." His jaw flexed. Calla shifted between us like a cracked pillar trying to hold 2 walls apart. "You can't prove anything," she whispered. Ruth opened the binder and flipped to the first page. "We already did." She handed her the documents. Calla took them with shaking hands as if touching the truth might burn her. We turned and walked away. No shouting, No theatrics, just the soft click of justice landing exactly where it was meant to fall, and the sound of a door closing behind us. The courtroom was quiet. Not tense, not chaotic, just quiet like everyone was waiting for a storm they hadn't realized was already here. I sat at the witness table uniform, pressed spine straight. Ruth sat beside me, steady as ever. On the other side, Calla flipped through her notes with trembling fingers. Mason leaned back jaw-clenched, whispering to his attorney. My father stared ahead, like the ceiling might collapse if he moved. The judge took his time, page after page, deed transfers, notary suspensions, financial trails, wire logs, audio recordings. Each document stacked on top of the last until the table before him looked more like a wall than a case file. Then he stopped, adjusted his glasses, looked directly at the bailiff. Lock the doors, he said, voice low but clear. No one leaves this room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. She didn't speak, didn't look at me. She just sat there frozen in a truth she hadn't prepared to face. My father didn't move, didn't flinch. He just folded his hands and looked away. Calla went rigid. Her shoulders rose slightly, then dropped like something in her had finally given up holding. The judge turned to me. Colonel Ellison, in your opinion, was this a coordinated effort to conceal fraudulent activity under your identity? Yes, I said. It wasn't accidental. It was planned. And it wasn't just about taking the house. It was about erasing me completely. I could feel the weight of the room shifting, not loud, but final. The judge nodded once and turned to Ruth. You may proceed with sentencing recommendations. And in that stillness, I knew the damage was done. Now came the reckoning. The judge read the sentencing without ceremony, just a steady cadence of facts. Mason Greer, 12 years federal prison for logistics fraud and abuse of federal contract systems. Mason didn't blink, just stared at the table, jaw-tight hands folded like he thought stillness might somehow reduce the weight. Calla Greer, 6 years for forgery, misrepresentation of property, and real estate fraud. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She just lowered her head as if finally realizing the performance was over. Richard Ellison, 10 years, no parole. Conspiracy to commit fraud, identity misuse, and unauthorized government access. My father didn't react. He looked past me, unmoved. As though this wasn't happening to him. As though nothing had ever been real enough to shake him. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just breathed. Outside, the air felt colder than I remembered. Reporters gathered at the courthouse steps, cameras, ready questions primed. I kept walking. A few men stood near the sidewalk. Veterans. I could tell by the way they stood shoulders square, eyes level, even if the years had bent their backs and dulled their uniforms. One of them reached out as I passed. Colonel Ellison, he said, steady and quiet. You reminded them we still stand. I nodded, not out of pride, but recognition. I didn't walk away with a house. I didn't want it anymore. What I carried was heavier and truer. They tried to replace me with paperwork and whispers, but in the end, I had something they couldn't forge. My name. And now it was written in the one place that mattered. The Defense Archive was quieter than I remembered. The air inside smelled like polished stone and old stories, the kind that didn't need to be retold to matter. I hadn't been back since before Bahrain, since before everything. The security guard nodded when he saw my badge. No words, just a silent gesture toward the far corridor, the one with the black granite wall. I walked slowly, letting the stillness settle around me. Every name carved into that wall had been earned, some by loss, some by sacrifice, some by a quiet persistence that refused to disappear. My fingertips found the grooves of my own name. Colonel Taryn Ellison, Cyber Command, 1998-2023. I traced the letters. I didn't need them to prove anything. But still seeing them there etched into something immovable meant more than any deed ever could. I thought about the boxes, the forged signatures, the frozen bank accounts. About Mason's smug smile, about Calla's silence, about the way my father never once said my name in court. And yet, here it was, in stone, without apology, without permission. They took the house, but they couldn't take this. Ruth called later that afternoon. The state had officially dissolved Ironfield Holdings. The title was frozen indefinitely. All pending claims had been denied. There was nothing left to dispute. The battle was over. I stood by the wall a while longer, long enough to feel the weight of everything settle into its right place. When I finally stepped outside, the sky was clean and wide. No crowds, no cameras, just a gentle wind and the steady rhythm of my own footsteps. I didn't walk away with property. I walked away with something far harder to win, the truth intact, the silence earned, and the kind of clarity that doesn't need to be shouted to be real.